What does that even mean, Bowers Game Corner?
Ahoy there, YouTube! I'm back again today for another game review, another special expansion review. And today I'm very excited to check out Voodoo Double Trouble from Mayday Games. This is for 4 to 12 players, take about 30 minutes to play. It's for ages 8 to 99. And in Voodoo Double Trouble, you're going to be playing your typical game of Voodoo. You're going to be rolling dice and casting curses on other people. But in this version of the game, you are going to have a teammate. So there will be new curses coming out that will affect both you and your teammates. You're going to be sharing points, casting curses, rolling dice. I like the original Voodoo, but do I like this expansion? Let's open it up and I'll tell you what I think about it. Alrighty then, we're going to take a look at what's inside of Voodoo Double Troubles. First and foremost, we got our handy dandy rule booklet here. You're just going to need this side right here, nothing on the back right there. And it will explain how the game is played pretty well. There are still some questions you might have from here and there about how various different aspects work. And I'll talk more about that in the pros and cons. Now, this game is going to now allow you to play up to 12 players with the caveat that everyone is going to be on a team with someone else. So you're saying, what about if you have an odd number? If you have an odd number, and I want to mention this at the beginning so I don't forget, then you can be on a team by yourself. You're going to score 1 extra point whenever you curse a player, and also you cannot be targeted by double curses, which are a new kind of curse in the game. So let's go over the new cards in the game. Well, before we get started, I do want to make this apparent that you are not going to be making decisions together per se. So let's just say there's 12 people around the table. You're still going to go around, and so everyone is going to have their own turn. So I did want to clarify that. So let's go over the new cards. So first we got new artifact cards, and many of these are going to specifically be catered to when you're playing a team version of the game. Luckily, they have this little crescent moon in the upper left-hand corner, so they're easy to remove if you were not playing a team version of the game, or you can modify rules, but I'll talk more about that later. So, mime drinking a beer after throwing the dice, choose 1 die and use it twice. Give your teammate 5, shouting, change! A curse that affects your teammate now affects you, and vice versa. Point to a spot away from the table. Draw 2 curse cards, and your teammate discards 1 card. Hey, look over there! Let's look at one more. Have we looked at the cornucopia? No, I don't think we have. Discard a curse card and make a trumpet noise in your teammate's ear. Your teammate draws the number of cards equal to the casting points noted on the discarded pile, or the discarded card. So you're going to have new artifact cards that you'll be able to just mix into the game when you are playing with the team version of the game. Also, you're going to have more permanent curses. Now, the permanent curses will definitely be designed for this version of the game when you're playing the team version of the game. If your teammate breaks a curse, mock him or her. If you don't, the curse caster wins 1 extra point. I like that one a lot. It's kind of funny. When your teammate casts a curse, ask, is that your final answer? If he or she doesn't answer yes, lose 1 point. And if your teammate is the target of a curse, comfort him/her with a head caress. If you don't, your teammate discards a card. Humorous stuff right there. So, in addition, you're also going to get 6 regular old curses, but these ones are all specifically going to be for the team version of the game. Before rolling the die, the target must remind his or her teammate to be careful and not break them. Tickle, tickle, tum. Before passing the voodoo, the target's teammate must laugh as though the target player is tickling him/her, so you're going to be more involved on other people's turns, which is always good. Before passing the voodoo, the target teammate must jump. Every time the target draws an artifact card, his or her teammate must repeatedly ask what has been drawn. And noxious dictatum, the target cannot touch the dice. It must be helped by his or her teammate. There's also one where you can't touch the cards, so those ones are very annoying. So last, we have, I would say, the stars of the show, which are the double curses. So these are going to impact an entire team, not just another player, but another team. So both team members have to play standing up. Before rolling the die, one teammate throws the voodoo high in the air while the other teammate catches it. The palm of the team member's hands must touch the palm of the other team hand. This one is ridiculously hard sometimes. Teammates must use terms of endearment with every noun. Have teammates put a hand on his or her teammate's forehead. Teammates' knees must always touch. One teammate's head must rest on the shoulder of the other teammate. And we'll look at 2 more. One teammate must link arms with his or her teammate. Team members' heads must always touch. So needless to say, you're probably going to want to be close to your teammate when you are playing the team version of the game. But that in a nutshell is what you're going to get inside of Voodoo Double Trouble. Alrighty then, Voodoo Double Trouble from Mayday Games. What are my final thoughts on this expansion? Let's go over the pros, let's go over the cons. First, on the con side, if you didn't like the original Voodoo, this is not going to change your mind. In fact, I feel like you're actually going to like this version of the game less than the other version of the game. Also, if you don't like team games, this one might not be for you, because if you have a bad teammate, you will probably lose the game, because they will give points to other teams because they don't want to do something, and just a lot of people don't like team games. So the main con that I have of this game is that it just feels clunky. It's a very clunky game with the team element added in. So there's a couple of things. First and foremost, I did not see it in the rule booklets, but you're divided into teams of 2, and you really need to sit next to your teammate, which is very odd. Most games where you have teams, you sit across for them. You just don't sit next to them. This game, you really need to sit next to your teammate, because you're going to have a lot of cards that are going to come into play where you have to be touching your other teammate, or manipulating their cards, or manipulating their dice, or locking elbows, or doing various different things in close proximity to your teammates, which is fine in a smaller game, but if you're playing at the, say, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 player count, that's where things start to get a little bit different, because, well, you know, it's going to be really difficult if you have 12 people at the table to be, you know, interlocking elbows with a person all the way across the table. So you need to be sitting right next to that person, and the rules, at least I didn't see it, don't explicitly tell you that. But that in itself poses an odd problem as well, because you're going to be having back-to-back turns, because each player takes their own individual turn, which means chances are, if you go first and your teammate goes second, you two are going to have not one extra turn, but 2 extra turns at the end of the game over the majority of other players at the table. You know, it can work out perfectly where it might end just at the right time, but most of the time it probably won't end like that. So I feel like going first at this point is going to give you a leg up, especially if you're going first and your teammate is going second. Now, in addition to that, it doesn't stretch out the game, which is surprising. You would think it would stretch out the game, but there's going to be so many curses going around that it didn't stretch out to the game to an unbearable length, which is what I was expecting to happen. But there is a lot more downtime in between turns at this point, because with, you know, especially if you get to 10, 11, 12 players, everyone takes a turn. So if you go, it's going to be 11 turns before it gets back to you, which can take quite a good deal of time. Now, it is still fun to watch other people's curses, and there are still cards that will obviously have you doing things on other people's turns, but yeah, that's going to bug some people. Now, the game can also be played at an odd number. I feel like it's best at an even number, because if you're playing at an odd number, you just feel a little bit left out. People aren't going to be casting double curses on you. You know, if you get a permanent double curse, it's kind of like, oh, I guess just draw a new permanent double curse because you don't have a teammate. I don't know. I would not really recommend the game as an odd number unless you're the person who's willing to sit out. I feel like it's less fun at an odd number than it is at an even number. Also, with this expansion, you can't play a 2-player version of the game, obviously, as a team. There's no AI or anything like that, but obviously I didn't like the 2-player version of the game anyway. So, I'm trying to think of any more cons that I have of this. You know, it just felt clunky, it felt weird. Oh, there's not... I really wish they would have included extra, you know, what is it, 6 or 8 extra tokens, so you could mark off the different players so that you would know who is on whose team. But granted, you're probably going to be sitting right next to each other, so it's not a big deal, but it is something that I thought would have been nice to add. Any other cons I have with the game? No, I'm sure I'll mention them if I think of those. So moving on to the pros. This is not a must-own expansion. It just is not. Because here's the thing. The game already plays well at 8 players. And I've played it with 9 players. Just we added like a little meeple, and that was what that player's color was. And I liked it better like that than I did the team version of the game. But that being said, I still had fun with the team version of the game. And I think if you like Voodoo, if you like the silliness, if you like the zaniness, I think you're still going to like this. Now, a lot of these new cards are going to force you to contradict the older cards. which some people are really going to dislike. Like, you're going to have to, like, cross your arms, but at the same time, you know, not touch the dice with your hands and use your elbows or something like that. And a lot of people are not going to like that. I personally like that. I like the more silliness, the more zaniness. Not to mention that those contradicting cards do speed up the game because people are going to be scoring more points as curses are broken, which is a good thing because I think this is a really fun game, but the game should not last too long. This is the kind of game that can definitely outlast its welcome if it slows down. So in the end, I enjoy the expansion. And I feel like if you really enjoy Voodoo and you think you're going to hit 9, 10, 11, or 12 players, or actually let's just say 10 or 12 players, then this is a okay expansion to get. Is it a must-own expansion? No. Absolutely not. 110% no. Well, here's another con I forgot to mention. You are really, if your teammate stinks, or if your teammate doesn't want to do a lot of the curses, you are going to lose. You will. You need to have a good teammate. So you're hoping everybody at the table is about as silly and zany as everyone else, because if there's one person at the table who's like not as willing to jump or sit on their hands or lock elbows or touch people, then that player and their teammate is going to lose the game. So there's a lot of stuff. This game is clunky, and I feel like this game is fragile, but it's still a fun game, and if you feel like you're going to hit 10 or 12 players, then yeah, you might want to check this expansion out. But for most people, I don't feel like this is a necessary expansion. And there's another con. I just keep coming up with these cons, is that these cards, the majority of these cards have text on them that will apply to your teammate. So make sure your teammate does this. Your teammate has to do that, which means at the beginning of every game, if you're not playing with teams, you either need to take them out, or you need to make a house rule that if you draw one, you put it to the side, or make a different house rule where you have to pretend that you are the other person, which is actually what we did, which is actually kind of fun because you have to pretend, or you can just say an opponent must manipulate your dice or your cards or something like that. It just contributes to the fact that the game felt clunky. It didn't feel like it was play tested as much as it should have been. So in the end, Voodoo Double Trouble. If you love Voodoo and you're hoping to hit 10 or 12 players, then yeah, you might want to check this one out. It's going to add more silly, zany cards, and I really do like a lot of cards in this game. But if you don't, you can steer clear of this one. I definitely like the Ninjas vs. Pygmies expansion better than this one. I would recommend that one leaps and bounds more than I would recommend this one. But if you're a completionist or you think you're going to hit those higher player counts, definitely check out Voodoo Double Trouble. And if not, you're going to want to steer clear of this one. So that is Voodoo Double Trouble from Mayday Games, an expansion that I had high hopes for, and unfortunately I was slightly disappointed with, but it still adds more silly, zany Voodoo fun to the game. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to click on that subscribe button down below, or in the comments below. Let me know, what would you do with Thor's hammer? So you have Thor's hammer, and it's in your living room. You can't pick it up. I think I would, well, we're assuming it's the real Thor's hammer, where you really legitimately cannot pick up the hammer. For me personally, I feel like I would charge people money to come see the hammer, take pictures of the hammer, and of course try to pick up the hammer. So essentially I would just move out of my house and I turn my house into like kind of, I don't know, a museum or something like that, make it a tourist attraction, because I feel like you could make a lot of money doing that sort of thing. I think $5 is a reasonable price to try and pick up the hammer, and you can make it like, if you pick up the hammer, you get to keep the hammer. So I think that'd be pretty cool. But it would also open up a whole other can of worms about, you know, gods and beasts and I don't know. It'd be interesting. What would you do with Thor's hammer? Very odd question. As always, thanks for your time, YouTube.